Hey guys, we're back with episode 6 of Monarch Legacy of the Monsters, and I've had a theory brewing for a few weeks now, which this episode only serves to feed into, but I'll explain my theory towards the end of the video. As always, I'm going to run through the events of the flashbacks before getting into the modern day storyline. So first we're looking at Monarch in 1955, a year after the group received military funding from the US government as a result of the perceived death of Godzilla. We as the audience knew that Godzilla hadn't actually died, and now Monarch knows it as well. But apart from the fledgling organization learning more about the Titans, there's also a romance brewing between Lee Shaw and Keiko Miura, one that builds as the two navigate the waters of politics in order to continue to stay in the good graces of the US government. After a missed opportunity, Keiko initially wants the two of them to deny their feelings as it could derail the mission, and in fact it does. Shaw ignores General Puckett's advice about leaving the grunt work to his quote unquote soldiers and focus on playing politics so that he could one day command Monarch as he likes. Because of that, the leadership of Monarch was handed over to a Navy admiral, striking a blow to the already tenuous relationship between Keiko, Bill, Shaw, and the military. Prior to losing this control, however, Bill and Keiko went to Japan to meet a scientist named Suzuki. Now, this guy is like a Japanese Bruce Banner, and he built a gamma ray beacon in the hopes of luring Titans to what he calls Monster Island, which is a little reference to an island that's been featured in a number of Godzilla films and other media, with its first iteration being in the film Son of Godzilla. Though in this case, it simply refers to a number of Titan sightings in the area, rather than an island where a number of Titans live out in the open. While Suzuki's beacon is successful and he manages to summon Godzilla, who simply throws the beacon onto shore, leaving Shaw, Keiko, and Bill to realize that the military's attempt to kill Godzilla was unsuccessful. And the flashback portions of the episode leaves on the part where I mentioned that basically General Puckett turns over control of Monarch to this Navy admiral, and I wouldn't be surprised if Keiko and Bill quit the organization, if only briefly, before coming back, because we know that they're still part of Monarch in 1959, which is 5 years or 4 years after the events of this episode. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But now we're moving on to the present day storyline in Alaska in 2015, where Shaw is basically attempting to make up for the years stuck in a retirement home, and he now has an ally in Duval, who has abandoned Monarch's mission in order to have an actual impact on the Titan situation. Now, the reason she agreed to help Tim, the reason she tried to get May on her side, and the reason she's freed Shaw is because she's the sister of Sandra Brody from the Godzilla film, who died in the Janjira incident in the 90s. That was a pretty interesting revelation, though it's something of a plot hole because you'd think that if she was working for Monarch and wanted revenge for her sister, or at least to prevent stuff like that from ever happening again, that she would have let her brother-in-law in on what was happening. I mean, that guy was obsessive about trying to figure out what was going on, and he was actually successful because he knew more about the Titans and the echolocation and all that than Sarazawa did, who I presume was the director of Monarch at the time. But Shaw at the end of this episode is willing to leave the Randa kids behind because he states that his mission is to help Godzilla. Now, he didn't elaborate on what he meant, but for a second, he almost sounded like the eco-terrorist Alan Jonah from King of the Monsters, who basically wanted to unleash monsters all over the world as a form of restoring the natural order. Now, based on how Shaw mocked Monarch's incompetence and talked about the Titans, I don't believe that he wants to see the Titans rule the world, but perhaps he witnessed an event with Godzilla in the past that convinced him that Godzilla needs to be successful in order for the world to remain in balance. Now, even though Duval had May feeding her information, she isn't relaying that information onto Monarch. However, Tim and Deputy Director Verdugo find Hiroshi's San Francisco office, and Tim is able to deduce that the Randa kids have a map of Titan emergencies and that there are only 3 possible locations for Hiroshi to be at. So Tim and a Monarch squad, as well as Shaw and the Randa kids, all separately converge on Hiroshi's location in Algeria and find him alive. He's using the same gamma ray beacon to awaken Godzilla, who for some reason is hibernating in the desert. Now, Hiroshi doesn't have time to reunite with his kids because he drives off with the beacon in the hopes of leading Godzilla away. And in the aftermath, the Randa kids and May split off from Shaw and Duval, as Shaw wants to find Godzilla before Monarch does, whereas the kids just want to find Hiroshi and they're willing to do it in their own way, rather than follow Shaw on his crazy hunt for a Titan. Also, May ends up spilling the beans to Kentaro and Kate, who now hate her, and as I guessed, the next episode is going to focus on May's past. Now, watching this episode makes me wish that the season focused entirely on the past events, not just because I find that part of the show more interesting, but also because I feel like the mystery of Hiroshi is getting dragged out a little too long. I mean, they just found him after 6 episodes, and now they have to start their search over again. You know what I mean? Like, are we gonna have to wait until the finale for the Randa kids to reunite with their dad? The same thing is happening with Shaw as well. In every episode, he promises that all will be revealed in time. It's getting a little old, and I'm really hoping that this isn't a Disney Plus scenario where the writers took what should have been a 2-hour movie and stretched it out into 10 episodes. I've enjoyed it so far, but it's starting to feel like they're just stringing us along. The desire to learn the mystery is fading. Speaking of Shaw, I'm starting to wonder if he really is crazy. Perhaps the death of Keiko, who we now know he was in love with, drove him over the edge. Adding to that, the fact that he's continuously screwed over by his superiors in the military, and perhaps that incident that was rumored to cause him to age slowly has something to do with the gamma ray beacon that Suzuki built. Who knows? Now, since we're talking about Shaw, I might as well break out my theory. I think that Shaw is Hiroshi's father and not Bill Randa. Now, this theory started when, in episode 3, Lee Shaw said that Hiroshi was more like a son to him than a nephew, as well as the growing evidence that Keiko and Lee had some type of relationship going on. Now, as we see in this episode in 1955, they in fact act on their feelings, and we can assume that their relationship becomes physical. Now, we know that by 1959, Keiko and Bill are married and have a kid, and there doesn't seem to be any hard feelings between Bill and Lee. So my guess is that Lee and Keiko get intimate, but they realize how much their relationship is going to damage Monarch, or perhaps Lee makes a decision that isn't reconcilable between the two. Now, despite the fact that Lee obviously doesn't like to play politics, we know that he makes it to the rank of colonel, pointing to the idea that he may have drifted away from Bill and Keiko for a short time. Perhaps during that time, Bill and Keiko grew close, got hitched really quick, and thought that they were going to have a son, which in reality was Lee's son. Now, in this episode, we do see that Bill is aware of Lee and Keiko's feelings for each other, but perhaps during a future falling out, that gives them the two to bond, and Bill, who is always so devoted to the mission, probably just doesn't think much of Lee and Keiko's former relationship. He definitely seems like that kind of guy. So there you go. That's my theory. If I turn out to be wrong, I'll admit it, but we'll see. Tell me what you guys think about this theory in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.